It's new Craig. Right, should we all... Let's all...
It says leave. I don't want to leave meeting. Should I just put got it? Did you
Yes.
Did you
Just
get
got
a
it.
message?
Don't leave
Don't
it.
Yes,
leave the
of course.
meeting.
No, don't leave.
Okay, so let's all clap at 45 seconds. Bang.
Right,
Through.
so this, yeah, you're happy with that? I did a terrible job, but I think as long as you can see the clap, I think that's fine.
Here's the Goats Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Goats Podcast, or as it's more modestly named, the greatest podcast ever. I'm Vinny and I'm once again your host for this evening, and I'm joined by the two usual suspects, that is Mork and Sebek, but I'm also joined by our special guest that I'm delighted to welcome here, Saru, who you may or may not know from the popular Red-Handed podcast. How are all of you?
Realisation that his colleagues had found out about goats and had seen it. And then I was like laughing along, and then I was like, but I've just got one of my colleagues on the show. Like, why would you do that to yourself? The anxiety is unbearable. But we're here.
No.
And it's going to be fine.
Exactly. We're here. It's all going to be fine. I'm excited. Thanks for having me on.
That's all right. Michael, are you doing better? You were a little bit ill.
Yeah, I was a bit ill earlier. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just not going to let that hold me down because I can't miss up the opportunity for this episode. So, and we're talking about one of my favourite things ever.
Hell yeah.
And I did offer to blow Lemsip up your bum, but you didn't reply.
Yeah, I didn't fancy that actually. To be honest, that was not going to help me.
Funny that.
They might have done. We never know.
that.
These things, you got to try anything in this situation. Anyway, Vinny, after you.
We may be in the depths of February, where it's more or less the complete opposite time of year for some spooky Halloween fun, but that certainly won't stop us today. Some of the earliest films at the dawn of cinema were horror films. Not that they were actually called horror films at the time, they were actually referred to as mystery films. But despite that, the act of going to the cinema to get frightened has been a pastime for millions of people throughout the past 100-odd years. From the German expressionist films of the 1920s all the way to our modern landscape, where the genre unfortunately has been seen as a bit of a joke, relegated to super cheap films that litter the Netflix home screen. Although, thankfully, the past few years, we've seen a bit of a renaissance for horror. Films like It Follows or Midsummer, which are redefining what it means to be a spooky flick. And as you may or may not know, I am a huge horror film nerd. So I've called upon my friends and special guest Saru from the popular podcast Red-Handed, trademark, to help me figure out what is the greatest horror movie of all time. Mork, did you say you wanted to go first?
Yeah, I thought I'd go first just while my energy's high, and then if I feel like I'm going to die later, I'll just quietly die in the corner.
Right.
But yeah, I'll go first. Are you
Tell me
ready?
when you're ready. Yep, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. So, horror movies, especially the classics, are a real passion of mine, like Vinny's. And there are many different subgenres of horror. You've got your classic monster movies, Dracula's, Frankenstein's, dating back all the way until like the 1930s. You've found footage films like the Blair Witch Project, and you've also got your ghostly films or like possession films like Paranormal Activity or Insidious. But in my mind, there's one particular genre which stands out above all others, and that is the well-established and downright awesome slasher genre. with films like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. These films always feature like a main bad guy who's easily recognizable and iconic. Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, the Leprechaun guy from Leprechaun, just to name a few. I can't actually remember what the Leprechaun guy is called. I don't think he's got a name. I think he's just called Leprechaun, isn't he?
I've never seen
watched
the
it.
Leprechaun franchise. Are they worth watching?
Well, they're not horror films, like they're not scary, but they are pretty funny. Leprechaun Goes to Da Hood is a pretty good movie, to be fair.
They're critically acclaimed.
Yeah, I would watch them. If you like slash movies, I would watch them. But now, if there's almost one thing that all horror movies have in common as well, or at least all the good ones, that's a certain low budget B movie charm where quality of filmmaking outweighs money spent massively. And the pick that I've chosen as the GOAT is certainly low budget, but it boasts one of horror's most iconic villains of all time, and was absolutely the most important movie in the slasher genre. So, of course, I'm talking about John Carpenter's 1978 masterpiece, the original Halloween.
Hell yeah.
Now, there were a couple of slasher movies that came before Halloween. Black Christmas and another one which I've forgotten the name of. But...
Well
but
researched.
yeah, I haven't written it down, but I can't remember what the other one's called. But Halloween, 1978, this really propelled the genre and was instrumental in the success of later movies that I've already mentioned. John Carpenter was a relatively unknown filmmaker. I think he'd only made one film at the time. And so he was awarded an absolutely minuscule budget of $300,000 and only 4 weeks to film the entire movie.
Wow.
20 days, yeah, which is like no money whatsoever and no time whatsoever.
The trouble with films, though, is anytime you talk about some tiny budget, it still sounds like such an absurdly large amount of money.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, it's really
Yeah.
difficult. Like, when someone's like, oh, the Blair Witch only actually cost £30,000. You're like, I could put a deposit on a house for that. Like,
Yeah,
you've
I
got
know,
a camera,
yeah.
some of your mates running around. Like, where's all this money going?
I think it goes to show just how much of a miracle it is that any film is made ever, because there's so many moving parts. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
so much money gets involved.
But at least with it, like, I do feel like the pressure of, like, do you know the new Black Adam film cost like $500 million, and it just
Yeah.
completely flopped.
Yeah.
Like, can you
God.
imagine having that much money resting on like a terrible film, and you know it's terrible, and everyone else knows it's terrible, and it's just going to come out, and you have to
Yeah.
just sit there and watch $500 million.
I'm convinced these people are just using it to embezzle money, though. Like,
It
I'm
must.
I
convinced
think
that's
so.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
It
think they
must be.
care. Directors are psychopaths, and the studio's like, whatever, we've got so much money. No one's even going to the cinema anymore. And the other people are embezzling it, for sure.
Yeah,
That's what's going on.
100%.
$500 million.
definitely agree.
What?
And it was shit.
Anyway,
it was really
that's
bad.
atrocious. I mean, I believe
I
you. When
can't
you
do-
say, like, the pressure of a film to succeed or this amount of money, I'm like, Seb, have you seen the latest crop of films, especially horror
that's
films that have
true.
come out? Like, these people don't care. I'm like, how can you have spent so much money and made such a terrible story? Like, how
Yeah.
could that be possible? How?
It must be a money.
How?
It's a money laundering scheme. There's no other way.
Oh, for sure.
We
It
should
must be.
write that as a headline. Black Adam was a money laundering scheme, and The Rock is just a dirty cheat.
Yeah. He looks the type, to be fair. I reckon he
he's
is.
such
It's
a
that
knob.
nice guy attitude, isn't it? There's something
There
going
you
on
go.
there.
There's something
gone.
under the
fishy.
surface.
He flew
Yeah.
too close to the sun. He's done like a Tom Cruise where he was like super charismatic and charming for a bit, and now people have really turned on him, and like people
Yeah.
fucking despise him now. He's just a bit boring. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now.
That's all right. Well, unlike Black Adam, John Carpenter does care because, like I said, he was only awarded $300,000, which is it's quite a lot of money. It's enough to buy a house, but it's not really enough to make a film when you have to pay actors, buy camera equipment, rent studio space, whatever you need. So he managed to band together a relatively unknown cast, which really only included one proper star, and that was Donald Pleasance. And he actually signed up to the film and was only paid $30,000 to do the film, which is quite good, I suppose, for 4 weeks' work. But as a major actor who was doing pretty well for himself, it's quite, it's not very,
It's also
very
a
much
tenth
money.
of his budget on just the
Yeah.
one actor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
holy
exactly.
shit.
Yeah,
Fucking hell.
yeah. But he thought it was really important to get him, and it's a really great performance. But because of that, he also had to give a film debut to the other main character, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, Jamie Lee Curtis, who at the time was only 19 years old. So this is her very first film that she was ever in, was this movie, Halloween. Yeah. Now, the budget was so small that the actors actually wore their own clothes to set.
No, they didn't. No,
Yeah, they did.
This is what I mean, though. £300,000 is enough to get people fucking clothes. What are you talking about?
Well, you say that, but they wore their own clothes to set because they blew almost the entire budget on this single camera that they used to film the movie. So they had to buy, these cameras were relatively new. It was almost like on a gimbal. It would take steady shots even though they were moving around. And he thought it was really important to have that camera based on the type of shots that he was using. So yeah, most of the actors wore their own clothes, maybe slightly modified by, I don't know, probably one costume designer, like chopped some holes in it.
So did Nick Castle just have that weird mask hanging about in his house then?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the mask. Now, that mask is like one of the most iconic masks and faces in horror movie history. It was actually bought from a local Hollywood prop store for $1.98.
Wow.
It was spray painted white. They dyed the hair and they cut slightly bigger eye holes, and then were just like, oh, that'll do. And now it's like super iconic. The boiler suit, I don't know. Maybe that was his. I don't know. Probably could have been. But what about the film itself? That's the budget and the production. But what about the film itself? Well, the plot revolves around an escaped mental patient named Michael Myers. Sorry, my boiler's making funny noises. Who was incarcerated for murdering his babysitting sister with a kitchen knife when he was only 6 years old. The entire time that he's in prison, he never speaks a word and is under constant supervision by his doctor, Dr. Loomis, who's played by Donald Pleasance, who hopes that Michael will never be released. But 25 years later, he escapes the hospital and goes back to the town that he's from and goes on a rampage, murdering teenagers. In particular, he's got a fixation with a babysitter, funnily enough, called Laurie Strode, and that's like his main target. Now, the movie starts out with one of the most powerful openings ever, I think, in all movies. It's this, like, stalking shot from 6-year-old Michael's perspective. We're, like, seeing it through his eyes. And it's really creepy. It's dark, it's full of suspense, and we walk through the house of Michael's eyes as he's staring at his sister, like, through the window and stuff, and creeping around through the back into the kitchen. He pulls the knife out. And through this whole scene, it's like 5 minutes long, the opening scene, only one word is uttered, and that's his sister screaming, "Michael!" as he plunges the knife straight into her. So there's no noise whatsoever. The only noise that we have is the amazing, like, theme title song of Halloween, which, funnily enough, was actually composed entirely by John Carpenter, because he wrote, directed the movie, and did all of the music.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Talented man.
You don't get that any like at all nowadays, even if you do spend like $500 million on a movie.
They just get off like one of those like free YouTube audio libraries.
Yeah, exactly. It's truly unnerving, and is actually one of the first and most well done stalking shots through the eyes of the killer in film, and it would be copied and replicated in basically every single slasher movie ever. Like every Friday the 13th movie, there's a shot of you as Jason through some bushes. It all came from this opening sequence in Halloween. Now, I've already said that.
Hang on, is Jason? Is he the same guy as in Friday the 13th?
That is the serial killer in
That
Friday
is
the
the
13th.
serial killer in Friday the 13th. Yeah.
But what about
Hockey mask
who's
guy.
the one? Who's the one in?
Michael Myers.
oh shit, it's different people.
Yeah,
I've been totally imagining the wrong film for the last. I was like, oh
No.
yeah.
Seb,
Wrong film.
Jason
you're
Voorhees has got a
fucking
hockey mask and a
cancelled
big
from
machete.
this conversation.
Yeah, how can you?
Do you know what though? Speaking of being cancelled, I was about to say,
Oh no.
this is such a rogue comment.
Don't say
no.
I'm gonna
No.
do this early so that I can go back and cut this out if it's not okay. But I do feel like horror movies are like the last place where you can just be like, it's just a fucking loony, isn't he? Like you couldn't do that anymore.
They are, but you're
Yeah,
going to
I
get
guess so,
cancelled because
yeah.
you didn't know the difference between Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, they're two
They're
very
just
different
Oh,
people.
they're just two nutters, mate. They're all the same.
Well, no,
mate.
because Jason Voorhees is not
No.
a nutter, as you said. He's a zombie.
Is he?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a little boy drowned in the river and like comes back to
He's
life
not a
and
little
like
boy.
goes
He's
on a
fucking
rampage.
massive.
He dies as a little
Yeah,
boy and he like
he
grows up
dies
as a
as a kid.
zombie. Yeah.
But
What, so
that's
you
what
just-
I like about Mike Myers versus Jason is that I think in Halloween, he's so much scarier to me than Jason because I think you
Yeah.
never know why he's doing what he's doing. I think too
yeah.
often, especially now with like modern horror, they're so obsessed with like showing you everything, over explaining, like so much exposition. And it's just like it makes it not scary. And I think like the subtlety of a good horror film is like to not tell you everything, to leave the mystery of the protagonist, if you want to call him the protagonist in it, rather than
Yeah.
obviously oh my god, what's her name? Jamie Lee
Laurie.
Curtis.
Yeah.
Rather than Laurie. But it's like I think the lack of information you have about him, the lack of information, the lack of understanding you have about why he's doing what he's doing, the total mystery is what makes him so terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like he
agree
never
with
speaks a word in the whole entire film. He doesn't say one
Yeah.
single word. And it's like he is just like he's just a mentally ill person and you've no idea why he's doing this. Like the parents don't know. Dr. Loomis, Donald Pleasant's character, doesn't know why he's doing this. They just know that he is dangerous, and that is, like you said, yeah, it's why it's really scary. Now the rest of the film is filled with like all super eerie and amazing like filmmaking techniques. And because of the low budget, there isn't really an emphasis on like gore and stuff. There's not a huge amount of blood, which is like a major trope in slasher movies going forward. Like a big part of why the Friday the 13th movies and like Nightmare on Elm Street movies I loved so much is like the craziness of the kills. Like, oh, what's he gonna do? Is he gonna like turn into a dragon and like bite his head off or whatever? Well, in Halloween it's a lot more subtle, a lot more real, and a lot more scary, like you said.
It's brutal.
Yeah, which is why I really, really like it. Like, I like both. I quite like sitting down and watching something crazy and ridiculous, but if you want, like, something that's actually atmospheric, Halloween, like, does it like no other slasher movie, really. And Michael is just the most, like, insanely creepy and imposing figure throughout the whole film. Like I said, he never says a word. He moves incredibly slowly, but with, like, so much strength and menace. He's like a rhino, but just walking through everything. And Carpenter said that the only direction he gave the actor was to move from mark to mark without actually acting. Just move slowly, don't act, and just be menacing, and it works perfectly. He's just terrifying, like so terrifying.
Wasn't Michael Myers played by like 4 different actors in that film, including John
Yeah.
Carpenter in one shot?
Yeah, it was played by a couple of different guys, depending on like whether they needed like a shot of his height or him like throwing something. They would get like I can't remember what their names are, but they're like a bigger actor, and then they're like a couple of smaller guys. Yeah, they would dress up a few different people in the costume. Now the movie comes to a climax when Michael is chasing and trying to kill Laurie through the house. She fights back and she manages to unmask him for a moment before Dr. Loomis comes in. Loomis shoots Michael in the head and the chest a few times. I think like 5 times he gets shot. And he stumbles and he falls off the 2nd floor balcony onto the floor. Now the final shot is Dr. Loomis looking over the balcony, and what he sees? Nobody. Michael has just vanished. He's gone. Laurie is like sobbing in the corner, and Dr. Loomis just looks like he's so nonchalant. He's completely unsurprised, as if he knew that if this like just pure cold-hearted killer ever got out, it would never be stopped, and he knows that that's why he's just gone. It's a really, really good ending and a great cliffhanger. I could literally talk about this film in particular forever. There's so much that I've missed out. I actually wrote a 3,000-word essay in college about why this movie is so good as part of my media studies like coursework, because Halloween is just amazing. And to go back to budget, Halloween was a major box office success and the first real Hollywood box office success. $300,000 it took to make, but it took $70 million at the box office.
Jesus.
I'm not very good at maths, but that's pretty good. That's quite a lot. Back in 1978 especially, for a horror movie, which always do really badly at the box office, that's amazing. It was revolutionary, it revolutionized horror, and it kick-started the slasher movie genre, making it easily one of the most popular horror genres through the 80s and the 90s especially. Every horror movie that came out in that time was some kind of slasher movie, or Friday the 13th sequel probably. And it helped lay the blueprint for how to do it. The impact this movie had, it's really hard to quantify. It's just massive, and we probably wouldn't have Freddy or Jason without it. It's scary, it's dark, it's unnerving, and genuinely, it's a complete masterpiece in just standard filmmaking. It's widely regarded as one of the best horror movies ever made, and in my opinion, it's the GOAT. That's it.
Very nice. I like it.
Like I said, I just love that film so much. I can't... Like, just from a filmmaking perspective, it's such a good... Like, just watch that, and then you know how to make a low-budget film that looks amazing.
I absolutely
absolutely.
I absolutely adore any film that has a shoestring budget. Like, there's something about it that's just so endearing, and just, like, I could do that. I could just get me and my mates with, like,
you
our
could
phones.
get 300 grand. And
Yeah.
we could just just start a Patreon. It'd be fine.
I think it also forces filmmakers to be more creative when they have less budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it stops them relying on the visual effects, and I hear what you're saying, absolutely, Michael, about like obviously there's the fun side of it when you want to watch something that's just got a lot of effects to it, maybe like gory kills and stuff like that. There's a reason there's like 17 million Final Destinations. But I think when you are a director and you're forced to do obviously you're talking about 70s films, so I love films that like practical effects anyway, much more than CGI.
Yeah,
CGI
same.
blood is just never going to compare to practical blood. But I think you're forced to work with what you have and be much more creative. And I think that the fact that a film like this has held up for so long and is still being talked about on a show like this shows, 300 grand? That's crazy.
300 grand,
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What's that? It's
Yeah.
like necessity is the mother of invention. You're kind of forced to like work your way out of a problem.
Yeah.
When you don't have the money, you have to like really think about it. It's the same as Jaws. Like when we did the greatest movie monsters, like the reason you never see Jaws is because he looks like shit. It's a
Exactly.
Jaws,
but that's
Jaws
what makes it scary. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Jaws,
And
Jaws
yet
the shark.
Jaws the shark.
Yeah.
And yet that's what makes him genuinely really scary, is because you don't see him, so you have to think about it. Whereas when you've just got $500 million, you can just kind of do what you want.
You think you can show what you want. And I think, like, I know this isn't the film we were talking about, and it's also not the film I'm going to talk about, but, like, the Blair Witch, the original Blair Witch, like, the reason that it is one of my favourite films ever, but it's not the one I'm talking about today, is because it's so subtle. You never see the witch. You never see anything ludicrous about, this scary, pointy woman down in the basement. You never see that. You just see the guy standing in the corner at the end of the film, and you don't know if it's a serial killer, if it's just he's gone crazy because they've been lost in the woods, or if it's because there's actually a supernatural witch down there. And then I think you look at the remake that came out a couple of years ago, and my god, it is awful. It's just like they show this like monster running around like chasing them through this house, and you're just like, it's because you have too much money and you don't understand the subtlety, the art of subtlety. And that's why The Blair Witch is such a great film, and that's why Halloween is such a great film. And I think it's a real shame that we don't see subtlety like that very much anymore in horror films, because that is what makes them great.
100%. That's
I
so
didn't know
funny.
they did a Blair Witch Project like remake.
Oh,
neither.
Yeah.
It was real bad.
Yeah.
It got really bad
that's
reviews.
Yeah, I'm never gonna watch
It makes no sense for a start, because it's like set in the modern times, because they've got like loads of technology, because they kind of try to make it like found footage again, but the way they explain why it's found footage and everybody keeps filming is that they've all got like little like I don't even know, like little headsets that are filming them or whatever. And they've got
so
drones
stupid.
and stuff. So it's obviously meant to be today. But then
so stupid.
the main character's reason for going is because he says it was his sister that got lost in the woods. And I'm like, that film came out fucking decades ago.
Like
you
20
would've,
years ago, yeah.
how could that be your sister and you're now
Yeah.
meant to be in your late 20s? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So don't watch it. The remake
No,
is
I
terrible.
won't.
Blair Witch 2 is also terrible, but Blair Witch 1 is great, as is Halloween. So yes, I take your points, but I think I have a better film.
Vinny, do you have a middle bit now, or are we doing a middle bit? When are we middle bitting?
I was thinking of doing a middle bit after the second presentation.
cool.
So I think that might land nicely, transition nicely into maybe Saru. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Sounds
I don't know
good.
if
Okay.
I don't know if Sebek explained it to you, but we've got like a 10-minute timer that I time, and then if people like start like interjecting
Okay,
with
cool.
things, I stop the timer because,
Okay,
and
great.
then I'll hold
Or
up
if
my
you do like,
fingers for like how long you got left.
Perfect.
or
Great.
if you do like a
Okay,
5-minute bit at the start that turns out not to be what you really picked because you thought it was funny, we restart the timer, which happens like most weeks.
Okay.
I don't restart the timer on that.
No.
Yeah.
Okay,
I was
that's
not
fair
going to
enough.
do
No,
that
it's
this
okay.
because I was
Got my
like,
notes.
I need all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
I'm
when
ready,
you are.
and I'll keep track of time on my end as well. But yes, okay, all right. I do think I have a better one. Obviously, the name of the podcast is Goats, and I think it's this one because I'm sticking in the 70s, and I'm going for The Exorcist.
Nice.
Yeah.
The
I
reason
did think I
I'm
did
going
this.
for this, I genuinely think that The Exorcist, 1974 The Exorcist, is the greatest horror film of all time because it is genuinely boundary pushing. It was genre changing. And Michael, your points about Halloween, you know, that it really allowed the space for other slasher movies to come in the future, 100% true. But The Exorcist was also culturally transformational. It affected the lives of people who had never even seen The Exorcist. And I think that the legacy it holds, therefore, is just so all-encompassing. And I think for me, it comes down to, first and foremost, if you're going to talk about like what makes the greatest horror film, is what you think horror is meant to do in the first place. Obviously, on a very surface level, you can say that horror movies are there to scare you. Yes, of course, but I also think that they're meant to challenge you. They're meant to challenge us. And I also think more than any other genre, apart from maybe sci-fi, but I would also say that that's also quite niche, more to do with technology. I would say that horror, more than any other film, any other genre, if you watch a horror film from a certain era, you can tell that it is reflective of the biggest fears of that particular era, of those particular people. Horror movies so like accurately reflect back the population's biggest fears because that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to tap into that and exploit those fears. And really importantly, I think it's meant to push the envelope and push boundaries in terms of what's acceptable. And, you know, there's not dramas that are doing that. Maybe you could argue that comedies are, but I don't think that anyone can get away with being as edgy or as boundary pushing as horror needs to be and should be. And I think often that's why, you know, it gets disregarded. And like you said, Michael, at the start, like it is seen as a bit of a not a joke category, but a category in film that isn't taken as seriously as I'm guessing all four of us wish that it was. For example, like Hereditary came out, and what an amazing film that came out a few years ago. And like I went to go watch it. My mistake, I shouldn't have, but I went to go watch it in a Cineworld on a Saturday night, and it was packed theatre, but people clearly misunderstood what this film was going to be about, and then, or what the vibe was going to be. And at the end, the guy who had spent the entire time sighing in front of me stood up and went, "Well, that was shit." And I was like, oh, it's because you just want to watch Paranormal Activity 17. Like, that's what you wanted, and this was a genuinely great horror film.
It's really funny because a lot of people I know who've watched Hereditary and think it's a great film, they don't really call it a horror, and I think that's really strange.
No.
'Cause it doesn't follow all the exact tropes of like your slashers, for example, and therefore it's not a horror. But I think that's completely misinterpreting the point of horror, to be honest.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I
I
think
think
there's a
what
very
it
fine line
was
between
meant-
some thrillers and horrors, isn't there, as well? I think.
Oh, yeah. And I'd say Hereditary spends very much like The Exorcist, the first 3/4 of the film being a drama, being like, in the case of Hereditary, it's very much like an exploration of grief. I mean, I know we're not here to talk about Hereditary because it's not my film choice, but like when the thing happens in the film that is the most shocking thing that's like happens right in like the first act of the film, the reactions from the characters, the raw emotion, the way in which Toni Collette like processes those, she should have won an Oscar for that, but no one's going to give her an Oscar because it was a horror film.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
horror films
I
always
think
do really badly at like everything. It's such a shame because they're such good films most of
absolutely.
the time.
I feel like the best you can do with a horror is
They
like try
absolutely-
and pose it as a thriller, and then people might
Yeah.
not like a
Yeah.
film like Seven, which is not my pick, but I think is a really really good like
Yeah.
horror adjacent. Like I think it probably is horror.
Yeah.
It has like horror themes in it.
For sure.
But like
Yeah.
that was definitely posed as like a thriller, because otherwise how would you get Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman to do it?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
Well,
That is
yeah.
true.
Yeah.
The other thing they do is they
And
just
actually-
make Paranormal Activity to like jump scare people, and then everyone gets a
Yeah,
big
yeah,
kick
yeah.
out of that.
Ugh.
And it's a terrible movie. It's just
Yep.
it's not a horror. It's just going, wow, of course you're gonna scare people, and then that makes loads of money
No,
at the box
it's
office.
just
'cause
loud
people just get like a
noises.
kick out of it, but it's rubbish horror.
What's that quote? It's like
It is rubbish
a
horror.
jump scare is the equivalent of a stand-up comedian tickling people.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like-
yeah.
it's like-
That's
yeah, it's like
exactly
not-
it.
it's
It's
like
I've not
awful.
heard that
It's not
before, but
horror.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
makes
totally
sense.
agree.
That's accurate. Yeah, I agree. And I think too much horror now is just based on jump scares that lead nowhere, that mean nothing. It's cheap. And the sad thing is that audiences love that. And, you know, whatever it is, I think while we say what we say about like the awards ceremonies not, you know, respecting horror in the way that they should, the one thing we can say is that currently, obviously, we all know that cinemas are struggling massively. People are just not going to
Yeah.
cinema anymore, not even just because of COVID, but prices, just generally the experience. But the only things that do well are big budget action films, like, you know, the latest Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, or a big superhero film, or horror. Horror is the only genre that does consistently well in the cinema. People will go watch any old horror that gets put out, but still not respected. Though I would say my film of choice did win an Oscar. So there we go.
I didn't know that.
That is
Yes,
fire,
it
yeah.
did.
Yep.
It did. The Exorcist actually got nominated for multiple categories, everything from best actors to like cinematography to soundtrack, everything. I don't know the awards categories because I couldn't give less of a shit about the Oscars, but it did win one, and I think that says again a lot for the cultural impact that this film had. So I'm not actually going to do a blow by blow of the entire thing. I'll do a very quick like plot synopsis, but I think most people listening will have watched The Exorcist. If not, I really implore you to go do it. So it's of course based on the, in my opinion, fantastic novel by William Peter Blatty. If people haven't read the novel, oh my God, read the novel. I actually read the novel before I watched the film, and it is such a good book. And William Peter Blatty was actually very, very like possessive over his story, as well, you know, he should be. So he actually wrote the script for The Exorcist himself, and he produced it. And he picked William Friedkin to be the director, and he said it was the only director that he would allow to direct The Exorcist. And if he wasn't interested in doing it, it wasn't going to get made. So very particular man, and thankfully it did get made. If anyone has seen The Exorcist, you'll know that there were no major stars really drawn into the film. I believe the original choices to play the mum in The Exorcist were Audrey Hepburn or Jane Fonda.
What?
I know.
That'd be mad.
Do you know what, actually? Full respect to Audrey, because she said, yes, I love it. I love the
Really?
script. I want to do this. But she was in Rome filming some other things when the Exorcist would have to be filmed. So she said, come to Rome, film it here, and I will be in it. But obviously, William Peter Blatty being very particular over this script. The script
Yeah.
is not based in Rome. He is like, absolutely not. It's got to be based where it's based. And you know, the original view he has of it, the staircase, everything, the house, these are all things that he specifically based the story around. So he was like, we're not moving it to a completely different city, a completely different country. So she turned it down, and Jane Fonda was like, this is absolutely horrendous shit, and I wouldn't come anywhere near this. So she turned them down. So they ended up getting I think what works well for them, a cast of people that were never really known actors before. And I think that can always work well because it stops people being taken out of the movie by seeing somebody like Audrey Hepburn playing the mum, for example.
For sure.
And the film, okay, it did get a bigger budget. It was like over $1 million. Let me just double check. I didn't actually write the exact amount down. Exorcist budget. It got 12 million. It got 12 million
Still
to be
massive.
made, but
It's pretty modest, yeah.
no, it's still modest. Absolutely. It actually ended up grossing quite a lot, but we'll get to that in a sec. But it only had 12 million to be made. And Warner Brothers actually lost faith with it pretty quickly. There were a lot of production issues, including things like the set catching on fire. There were a lot of injuries suffered by the cast members. So if anyone's seen it, the scene where the mum gets pulled backwards when she's like dealing with her 12-year-old daughter Reagan in the fits of like a demonic possession, and she falls backward and she looks like she hits her head and her back and she screams. That was real. That they really fucked it up
Did she, like, break her
because
back or
apparently they
something?
did. She really got very, very badly injured because she was strapped up to like a thing to pull her back, like a harness.
Like a rig,
And apparently they'd run the scene again and again and again. And Blatty just wasn't happy with how it was looking, and nor was Friedkin. And so then apparently they told the guy who was operating the rig, let her have it. And so they pull her back and she hits, and they're like, that's it. We got it. We got the shot. And they kept it in, and they kept it in. The woman who does the voice, exactly. Well, you know, if it's a choice on your part, then maybe that's more acceptable. But yeah, they wouldn't.
Like,
I mean,
when they
there's a
lead in
reason it was the
moments where actors get
70s.
injured. Yeah,
But they're just like, look how good it looks.
Yeah. It's like when Gandalf hits his head at Bilbo's house. It's like, just have to leave it in. It's so good.
Precisely. And the woman who does the voice of Pazuzu, the demon, the worst named demon ever, but please don't let that detract from how genuinely terrifying it is, actually was a recovering alcoholic, and having to do the voice over and over and over again of the demon actually drove her back into becoming an active alcoholic.
Wow.
So it just ruined a lot of lives. A lot of lives.
Horrible.
And
This is a great film.
yeah, and my favorite / worst fact about it is that there is a real life serial killer in the film that they didn't know he was a serial killer at the time, but he was an active serial killer when he's in the film. So the doctor who is doing the tests on 12-year-old Reagan, he is a serial killer who was killing men during the time that he was in that film. And he was called the trash bag killer.
What?
Oh my days.
Yes.
That is mad.
Yes,
That's
because
Bonkers.
he would
It's like the whole film,
kill
the
gay
production,
men.
everything is like possessed and horror.
Wow.
It is. It's through and through. It's there. So he was killing gay men, chopping them up and leaving them in bin bags around the city. So, yeah, he's in there. So that's fun. Exactly. So I think, like, although I'm not going to do a blow by blow, if we do a rough synopsis of the film, obviously the idea is that 12-year-old Reagan, she gets possessed. Or I think that's also the interesting thing about The Exorcist. A lot of exorcism films that have come out in the many, many, many years since, a lot of them tend to play on the thing of like, is it really possession, or is it mental illness, or is it something else? Like, what's going on? In The Exorcist, although the characters in the story are not immediately convinced that it's an exorcist, that it is a demonic entity, which I think is a part of the great thing about it. We as the audience are meant to know that it is kind of a demonic thing right from the get-go. And I think that the film is pretty fucked up. Like, you have a child, a 12-year-old child in it, masturbating bloodily with a crucifix, pushing her mum's face into her downstairs, screaming, lick me, lick me. Like, there is no way you can tell me, even in today's time, that isn't shocking. It's still shocking. Imagine what the audiences in 1974 were thinking. And also just generally this girl who's like horribly, like, goes from being this kind of angelic faced child into being this like horribly haggard, demonic possessed thing, screaming sexual profanities at a priest, is still pretty outrageous, I would argue. But although Warner Brothers lost faith with it, they didn't even give it a major release. Can you believe The Exorcist did not have a major release? Because they were so not convinced that this film was a good idea. They watched it at the end and they were like, what the fuck are we allowed to be made? And they were like, no way. But when it came out, audiences were falling all over themselves to watch it. This film then got a major release after audiences were like clambering to get seats to watch this film. And I think like the film itself, to me, very much like Hereditary, is more of a drama for the first 3/4. It's really about the crisis of faith of this priest who is thinking about leaving the church because he's losing his beliefs in God and what have you. And also it's about probably this kind of impending fear of like maybe an overdependence on science and technology, because the mum absolutely doesn't think it's anything demonic. She takes Reagan, her daughter, as all of us would, to a doctor. She wants a scientific answer. She wants a medical answer, but nobody is able to give her this answer. And when they can't, they're just like, well, we don't know. And I think that there is something in there about maybe not being overly dependent on either side, like on your faith or on science and technology, because no one side has all of the answers you need for all of your problems. And I also think from the mum's point of view, she is just completely unable to help her child who's going through the most horrendous thing that could possibly be happening. And I think that also speaks to that kind of parental fear that people would have been going through at that time. The other thing that makes The Exorcist incredibly, incredibly powerful is that before The Exorcist came out, the Ouija board was just a Hasbro toy. It was just a toy that people had in their house. It was a parlor game that families played together called it was like a spirit board. That's what it was called. But that movie changed things completely. And it turned what had been a toy that was made by Hasbro into a genuine tool of the demonic. It became a board that could like truly open a portal to hell. And I am a skeptic through and through, but even I wouldn't want to play with a Ouija board in my house, even though I know logically it's not real. And also the other thing with The Exorcist is that you can literally trace the roots of the satanic panic phenomenon in the US all the way back to the release of this movie. It kickstarted everything, and it led to decades and decades of like this nationwide paranoia where people genuinely now believed that the devil was this real thing that could be living next door in anybody, even a 12-year-old child. And it left dozens of children, hundreds of children traumatized, and countless adults genuinely in prison for not only crimes that they didn't commit, but for satanic crimes that had never even happened. Some of those people are still in prison today. How many films have a legacy like that? I think that the legacy of The Exorcist goes beyond just horror films. It goes into like the wider world. And I think that's why. And I also think that the ending of the film is so satisfying because, again, how many horror films, we all like horror films, how many horror films have genuinely satisfying endings? Not many of them. But I think the ending of the horror film here, where Damien, the priest, gets the demon to take over him and leave 12-year-old Reagan behind, and then he throws himself down a flight of stairs in order to kill himself and kill the demon, or get rid of the demon with him. And I think it makes me sad when some people I see misinterpret that ending and think that it has something to do with the demon winning because it kills Damien Karras. But that's not how I see it at all. I think it's a man who was losing his faith, regaining his faith, seeing Pazuzu for what it was, believing Reagan and that she was possessed, and atoning for him not being able to help his mother, which is like a whole nother side plot going on in the film. And finally, the only thing I will say about this, because I'm pretty sure I've run out of time, is Tubular Bells. Tubular Bells.
Yep, goes hard.
Tubular Bells is an iconic piece of music. And this is my favorite stuff about this. It was Virgin Records' first big hit. Did anyone know that?
No
So Tubular
way.
Bells, owned by Virgin Records, and it was their first ever big hit after The Exorcist came out.
Wow.
Completely iconic. And the thing I love about this the most is Tubular Bells is in there for like, it's like a couple of bars. It's like a couple of bars is played in The Exorcist, and it's not even when anything scary is happening. It's when the mum is running down the street. Nothing scary is happening. Tubular Bells plays, but that has so like deeply like embedded itself into people's psyche that today, even if you've never seen The Exorcist, you know what that music is about.
Yeah.
And I would just say I love this film. I think the overarching like cultural impact that it had, everything that it like did for the horror genre, and the fact that it won an Oscar, even though I don't care about Oscars, I think speaks for itself. And I think it is the greatest horror movie of all time.
Wow, thank you very much.
That was incredible.
I love that film. Seb, you've never seen The Exorcist, have you?
No, I've never seen any of these films. The only film I've seen is the one that I've picked.
You're not a big horror buff, are you? But I hope this episode changes your mind, because like all your favourite movies are like The Avengers, which are like pointless and meaningless and carbon copies of themselves. But like this podcast, hopefully us talking about these like amazing films will hopefully change your mind, because like The Exorcist is literally just like groundbreaking. Like
feel
that's
so
why people are
turned upon.
clamoring to like the cinema to see it, because it's the only genre in film, probably, like you said, that can do things that break boundaries, like make people think, holy shit, like can I actually just see like a 12-year-old demon doing that stuff? It's like, yeah, you can. Like, it's shocking, and it's supposed to make you shocked for like all different films for various different reasons. So Seb, you need to start watching these movies, mate.
I know I do. I just haven't. And
No,
I'm 26
no one cares
now.
about the Avengers. Get onto these films.
Even lots of people care about the Avengers.
Yeah, but
They're wrong.
yeah.
They're also children, but we'll move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because wasn't The Exorcist re-released in like 2005 in cinemas because it was so scary, and it's still so scary to this day that they
It's
could get
still
away with
scary.
re-releasing it, and people were like, "This is still scary."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think they remastered it and re-released it and
Yeah.
like digital Blu-ray and stuff, and it is just a film that I think absolutely, because I'll take the point that I think maybe a film like Blair Witch, if you showed it to an audience of like 22-year-olds now, I don't think they would find it scary, because I think so much of it has to do with like the conversations, the subtlety. I don't know if people have got the patience for that now, but I think The Exorcist, even if you showed that to a 20-year-old today, I would be shocked if they weren't scared, or at least shocked by what was happening.
Yeah, The Exorcist and the Blair Witch Project were like the only films that actually scared me when I watched them as an adult.
Yes.
Like, they genuinely terrified me as an adult.
Yeah.
Because I don't get scared by films very
Absolutely.
often. It's like those two, and then like 1953's War of the Worlds. That really scared me as a kid. Like, I couldn't go to the bathroom for ages because there's a bit of an alien in there. And I was like, nah.
Oh yeah, I remember being
I'll honestly,
terrified
I'll
of it.
say, I watched Blair Witch like a few years ago, rewatched it, and I was genuinely terrified, like actually scared.
It is
no,
really
no,
scary. Yeah.
It is.
Seb, have you seen
Great
it?
atmosphere.
But again, it's because they don't show you anything.
You know I haven't seen it. Don't ask. You're just setting me up for
It's
failure.
like a pillar of cinema.
Look, all I can say is, right, from my perspective, you love all these films and these characters.
Yeah.
Imagine if you watched all of them.
Characters.
No, don't say Avengers, but like all the baddies.
Wait. Imagine you watch them over like a 10-year span, and then after 10 years, they're like, right, we're going to get them all in the same film, and they're going to fight Thanos.
Sure.
No.
Sure.
I'm not going to
Sure.
win this, am I? Oh,
What-
no.
They did have Freddy versus Jason, which is not a very good horror
did.
movie, but it's a pretty
love that
fun
film.
it's a
And
pretty
maybe you
fun
could
movie.
say Alien
Yeah.
versus Predator. Maybe
That
you
was
could
a
say
thing.
that.
Alien vs Predator is really
Yeah?
good. Yeah, they're really fun movies. I like watching them because they're like really enjoyable and fun, but they're not like super good horror movies, even though they're in that category. So
I don't even know if Predator. Would you say Predator's a? Because I've seen Predator.
more of an
so I can't
action
really
film.
be
I'd say Alien is, but Predator
Alien
is
is,
more of an
yeah.
action.
Alien is a horror
Alien
movie, but-
definitely is. Yeah.
yeah, not Alien 2 or sorry, Aliens. That's not a horror.
Aliens,
I wouldn't say
yeah.
that's a horror.
Yeah.
That's like an act. Then
I've
it
watched
starts
all
to
of
go to
them.
action,
I
but
absolutely
yeah.
love the Aliens.
Yeah.
Do you actually?
I love
didn't
the
know
Alien
that.
franchise.
Me and Vinny
great.
love
Oh my God.
Aliens. When we were younger, we made like a
I love
video
it.
series of us reviewing them.
Yeah, we were 15.
Yeah.
Let's dig
Yeah.
that out.
They
Let's
never
dig
got
that
No,
out.
I
released.
love
They're all
Alien. I
gone.
think Alien might be my favorite horror franchise. To be honest,
Really?
I think
Yeah, I love it.
It's a good horror
Ridley
franchise.
Scott. Like, yeah, I would say Alien is my favorite. Yeah.
I'll say it once. I've said it again. Nothing beats the Predator franchise when in like Predator 3. The Predator decides that people with autism are the next step in evolution and therefore stops killing them.
You ain't wrong, though. You ain't wrong.
Oh dear.
Right, before we get to the middle section, do you mind if I quickly go pop to the loo?
Oh, Vinny. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, The Exorcist is such a great shout. I was thinking like, oh, should I do The Exorcist because like,
No, I'm glad
It's,
you
like,
didn't,
so
because that's the one
groundbreaking,
I
but
feel
then
the most
I'll-
passionately about.
yeah, I was like, yeah, that was the thing. That's why I didn't pick it. I was like, I don't feel passionately enough. I probably feel more passionately about Halloween. I nearly picked John Carpenter's The Thing as well for the
Yeah.
reason of practical effects because like that film's all practical effects. I fucking love practical effects. Like whenever I watch a movie
No,
with
it's
my
good.
fiance, I'm like, did you see that? Look, that's a practical effect rather than like CGI. And she's just like, I don't care.
No, that's fair. That's also a fair perspective to have, I think. But yeah, if you like Jaws and you like Exorcist, I can really recommend. There's a podcast series called Inside the Exorcist, Inside Psycho, and Inside Jaws. Like they're 3 separate seasons of the same show, and
Yeah.
they're so good, so good. It's just like a
deep
real
diving the
deep
films.
dive
Yeah.
into it, and all the stuff about Tubular Bells being on Virgin Records, like all the stuff they did to the actors behind the scenes, like that. I got all of that from Inside Exorcist, and like it's absolutely terrifying because they also look at like the real life case that inspired it. Yeah, no, it's really good. All 3 of them are very good.
What was the... Is The Exorcist the one that we did the live show about the people who made the
No.
book about? What was that?
No, that was Amityville.
Amityville, yeah, that's the one. That's not good.
No, that was also not good. But yes, Amityville, no, different case.
Right. V-Dog, middle bit.
Got a middle bit. So, got a middle bit tune. So we got a quiz, and what I'm going to do is we're going to go around. We're all going to... so each question is kind of been tailored towards each of you, because I know Sebek's not huge into horror films, so his ones are
Avengers themed.
a little bit easier. Mork's ones are a bit harder, because I know he loves them. I kind of went slightly down the middle with you, Sru, because I had no real
Good.
idea. But how it's going to work is I'll ask the question, and then if you just want to answer straight off, and if you get it right, it's 2 points. But if you get it wrong, it's 0 points. Move on to the next question. But if you don't want to answer straight off, and you want to have a little bit of help, I have multiple choices. But you'll only get 1 point if you choose the multiple choices.
Okay.
Cool. So, Sebek,
Yes.
which
Spider-Man.
horror film? No. I'm not going to count that. I'm going to be...
I think you should. That'll teach you.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Mork.
Imagine if it was right.
No, you fuckers. This is bullshit.
Which horror film, Sebek,
Yes.
did the actor Johnny Depp get his debut start in?
Even I know this. Some Edward Scissorhands. No?
That's not a horror film.
Yeah, it is. He's got scissors on his hands.
Right, 0 points. It was Nightmare on Elm
It's
Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street. Edward Scissorhands.
Good
He's got
guess.
This
scissors
is so
on his
embarrassing.
hands.
This is the worst this could have gone for me. I've just been called out. I can't use any of my... I can't just regurgitate pop culture to get me through. I absolutely don't know anything about horror films.
Well, this is going to be great for us.
Oh, fuck.
Saru. Which Steven Spielberg film... Now, his name is just attached to it. It's not like... he might have directed it, might have just been an executive producer, but he was involved. Which Steven Spielberg film was considered cursed with several actors supposedly dying because they were in the film. You can choose multiple choices if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm going to go multiple choices because I feel like I remember hearing this, but I don't know which one. But I'm hoping if you tell me some choices, it might trigger something.
Okay, so Arachnophobia, The Omen, or Poltergeist?
I think it's Poltergeist.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
You would be correct. It is Poltergeist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
It was like 4 cast members died, and the
Oh,
little girl
wow.
who's
It's
like
the TV, isn't it?
Yeah, the one with the TV. It's like the
Yeah.
little, I think it's the little girl who is like the sort of main character in it, I guess. She died when she was like 12.
Ah.
And I think that's the movie where they used actual corpses in one scene. They didn't tell the actor, and she was like in a swimming pool with loads of these
Like
corpses.
a
And
cadaver. Yeah.
they use actual
Oh my
like skeletons, real life skeletons.
You can't do that.
No, it's pretty fucked up, isn't it?
Could then.
Right, Mork.
Yeah.
Many consider 1922's Nosferatu to be the first film adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
But for copyright reasons, the filmmakers had to change the name of the vampire to what name?
Count Olaf.
You gonna go for it? Count Olas?
Oh, Olaf, I said. I
Okay,
think
neither of those are right.
What was his name?
Oh.
Or Orlok.
Olaf.
So you were close.
Oh, it was so close.
You were
Oh,
close,
God
but
damn it.
unfortunately that's
I
0
really
for you.
thought I knew it, yeah.
Right, back to you, Sebek.
Yes. Can I get a
19...
point on the board?
I believe in you. I believe in you.
I don't know if I do.
1976's The Omen follows the story of a child who is said to be the devil's own son. What is the name of that child in the movie?
Oh my god.
Come on, Seb.
We just did a case where the one of the killers got called this at school because they said he looked like him.
I was called it as a child once.
Oh fuck. Oh god.
You can have the multiple choices if you want.
Yeah, do the multiple choice. I just need a point on the board.
So, your choices are Damon, Damien, or David.
It's Damien.
Okay, yeah, you got it. Damien.
Shit! I knew that. It was in my lizard brain and it wouldn't come out.
Saru. The script for the horror classic Halloween never called for a specific type of mask for Michael Myers to use. But the mask that was chosen was a replica of a famous actor's face. Which actor was it?
Is it William Shatner?
It is William Shatner. Yes. Yes. Fantastic.
Did you know
2 points for
that in a similar thing, have you seen Baby Driver? The film. You know that they're at one point they're wearing masks that are like Michael Myers masks.
Yeah.
But then Michael Myers is in the guy who played Austin Powers.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
as in
yeah.
the and that was a genuine accident. They
Oh,
sent a guy, they
really?
sent like a runner off to get Michael Myers masks on the day of the shoot, and he came back with like Austin Powers ones.
Cat in
and
the
they were
Hat.
off.
Oh, that's so funny.
And they just had to go with it.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah, I had to
next.
omit my William Shatner Star Trek mask fact for this quiz. Vinny was like, "Oh, you can't say it because it's a question." I was like, "Fuck, God damn it."
Yeah.
Oh.
Mork.
Yes.
Psycho, The Silence of the Lambs, and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre are all iconic horror movies.
Yeah.
But they were all inspired by the same real-life serial killer. Who was that serial killer?
Oh. I'm going to have to go multiple choice because I feel like if you say the name of it, I might get it. Whereas I
Okay,
don't know off the top of my head.
So your choices are Ted Bundy, Ed Gein, or John Wayne Gacy.
I think it's Ed Gein.
You are correct. It is Ed Gein.
Yes. Because
who
of the cannibalism
famously-
thing, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
He
He
sewed
made-
people up and stuff.
Oh,
Then he
he's a
made.
proper wrong'un.
Made
Yeah.
furniture of like skin Yeah.
He's like the
Yeah.
murderer's murderer. Like he's like real bad.
He's like the OG, isn't he? He's like, yeah.
Favorite murderer's favorite murderer.
Yeah, exactly. He's your favourite murderer.
It's like MF Doom, but for murderers.
The MF Doom of murderers.
God, I keep losing track of this. Sebek,
Yes, that's me.
what is the highest grossing horror film of all time?
Do you mean horror franchise or horror film?
Horror film, single film.
Sure, you don't mean horror franchise? Because I could probably do that. Nah,
I'm
do multiple choice. I can't pull that out of the bag.
So your choices are The Exorcist, The Sixth Sense, or It, the 2007 one, not the miniseries, obviously.
I don't know, but my thinking
2017.
is, it came out the most recently. Is this adjusted for inflation or is this straight up money?
Inflation.
Oh fuck's sake! Oh, that was my one. What was the options? The Exorcist, The Sixth Sense, or It.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, my head's saying The Sixth Sense.
You would have been correct if this was 2016, but unfortunately it's It. Which
Oh,
really, that really surprised me, to be honest.
Yeah,
That really,
that surprised me as well, to be fair. I would have
Yeah.
said The Exorcist, to be honest, but...
yeah.
The Sixth Sense is the one where Bruce was dead the
Willis.
whole time.
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, he was
Yeah.
dead the whole time. Do you know what? I felt really bad because I once used that as an example of one of those things to someone who'd not seen it. And he was like, oh, for fuck's sake. I didn't know that." It was a whole thing. Anyway,
The
I
film's
thought
like
everyone
20
knew
years
that.
old.
This is
You
the
can't
thing,
be
yeah.
upset about that.
It's like the absolute epitome of that. It's Bruce Willis was
Yeah, no.
dead the whole time. I've never
No.
seen it, and even I know that.
If
Yeah,
a film's
yeah.
older than 2 years, I don't think you have a right to be upset about
100%.
Yeah.
You
You can
spoilers.
just spoil it.
It's too late. Yeah.
Saru. How many feature-length Friday the 13th films are there?
Ooh. I'm just trying to see if
There
I can work
are-
out adding them up.
12.
Wow, 2 points to you.
Yeah, I was going to say...
That's insane. Just straight off the bunts. Just
Oh my lord, she's absolutely running away with this one, not gonna lie, lads.
Yeah, because there were two more after Jason X, which would be the 10th one, where he goes to space,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
They're making a new one, which is going to be the 13th, and it's going to be like a pure reboot of the series, I'm pretty sure.
Another
Jesus
reboot.
Christ.
Yeah, like another
They
reboot,
just haven't
yeah.
got any ideas anymore.
I know.
No.
Just do another
leave
reboot.
it.
Why not? Just leave it alone. Fuck's sake.
Mork,
Yeah,
your final question.
I need a big tour here to beat Seb.
Many horror films have extremely cheap budgets, so that in the rare case they do blow up, they become insanely profitable.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the most profitable horror film ever?
Yeah, I
Right.
also think I know.
Give me a multiple choice, because I'll still beat Seb with 1 point.
Paranormal Activity, The Blair Witch Project, or Jaws?
Oh, it's got to be the Blair Witch Project, surely. I'm going to go with Blair Witch Project.
Again, you would have been correct if this was like 10 years ago.
What?
But it's Paranormal Activity.
Oh, for God's sake, Paranormal Activity is shit.
It's just people in a house with a handheld camera and a
Oh,
sheet.
yeah.
That's
Cool.
insane.
It's
I
like
didn't know that.
it's like 3 times less the budget of the Blair Witch Project, which actually shocked me. It
Yeah.
made
yeah.
85,000% of its budget.
Jeez.
Fuck me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really. I guess it's just like 4 people in a house, and that's
Yeah.
it.
There's
on a video
nothing
camera.
going on. Yeah.
Damn it! And
the guy-
everybody loved it. God damn it! That's so true.
Yeah.
Did the guy who made it actually get the money from it, unlike the guy from Blair Witch who didn't get anything?
I don't know.
Isn't that the whole thing, that the guy from Blair Witch made like 5p and then he like never made any money off of
I
it?
don't know.
No idea.
Do you know what? I did hear this recently though. Do you know Matt Damon, the actor?
Yeah.
He is recorded as the actor who turned down the most money from any film because he unknowingly, he was asked to be in the original Avatar and he said no, and they said we'll give you 10% of box office revenue, and he said no, and he would have been like a billionaire.
Oh
But he
yeah.
just,
Probably
Wow.
is.
just said no.
Damn.
Wow.
What a
I
fool.
definitely would. What a fool. Yeah.
Well, it's about. I don't like avatars personally, but
Oh, shit.
No, another film where they just had too much money and have got zero
It is shit,
story.
isn't it?
Like,
it is so
it's
boring. I've never
absolutely
seen the whole thing.
terrible.
Everyone's like
It's the
banging
most-
on
They
about the
don't
new
care
one.
about
it's
the
so
story.
good. But I'm like, oh, it looks
No,
okay.
no.
Like, you can still tell it's fake,
No.
but I'm just bored.
I
Like,
won't
don't-
be
I don't
rewarding
care
them.
For this story.
I've got a
No,
friend whose
it's
favourite movie
terrible.
is Avatar.
It's terrible.
As well.
You've got a friend whose favourite movie is Avatar.
Yeah, it shocks me a lot to hear that.
What?
Yeah,
I didn't know anyone's favourite film was Avatar.
Yeah, Avatar's
The
so
best
bad.
is like just a mid. It's like
I've
very
seen it
mid.
described on Twitter, and it's my favorite description of it. It's so unoriginal. It's just Pocahontas in space. That's all it is.
Yeah,
It is.
That's
it
it.
is just dull. Yeah.
And Pocahontas
very
has better
okay
songs. Yeah. No.
So actually, the scores are really close. So I'm gonna have to do a tiebreaker. So you're all just gonna buzz in with an answer. First come, first serve.
Okay.
Your answer is what you get. But if we go around and you guys haven't got it, then we'll keep going until we get it. I believe in you guys. We can get this.
Cool.
So, what is the highest rated horror film on IMDb?
Is it?
Not it. So I bet you're out for this round.
Shit.
It's not Halloween, is it? Because I know that's like 8.2.
Halloween's your answer. It's not Halloween.
Damn it.
True.
Oh, God. I don't know. Everyone has such horrible taste. The highest rated horror film. I also think it's confusing, like, what's actually being called a horror film.
This is definitely a horror film.
It's definitely a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go Rosemary's Baby.
Nope. Do you want to go around again?
Oh god, you know I always make this joke, but I do feel like Mark in that episode of Peep Show when they're doing the band names, and all he can say is like Coldplay and the
Saviour.
Beatles.
And the Beatles,
I'm just like The Exorcist. I'm just all that's in my head is the three that we've already
Highest
mentioned.
rated.
That's all that's in my head.
Have we mentioned it? Can you give us a clue? Have we mentioned it in this episode?
In this podcast, we have definitely mentioned it, yeah.
The Exorcist.
Nope.
We have.
Fuck.
Oh, we haven't.
The
No,
Sixth
we have
Sense.
mentioned it, but it's not The
Oh,
Exorcist.
we have.
The
It's
Sixth
not
Sense.
The Sixth Sense,
Okay.
Saru.
Oh god.
It's not Hereditary,
Nope.
is it? No. Yeah.
It's not Jaws. Is it
Not
Jaws?
Jaws.
Jaws the shark.
Jaws the shark. Here he comes. He's gonna bite you.
Not Jaws. Come on. Wasn't too long ago when we mentioned
Alien.
this. Yes, it's Alien!
Oh,
Can you imagine?
course
I
it
just
was
got the
Alien.
point.
there you go. Of course it's Alien.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 points for that. So,
I got 2 points.
got 2 points for that. So, this was a really close one. So, Mork ended with 1 point. Sebek comes close by 3 points. And Saru wins it all with 5 points.
Fucking hell.
Well done.
Jesus.
Hey.
Well played. Well played. Right. I think that leaves Sebek. That
Just
leaves
me.
you. Yeah.
Just
With
Seb.
my deep knowledge of horror films to wow you all with something completely unexpected.
Can't
A
wait.
film that you've never even fucking heard of.
Oh
Can
my
you
gosh.
imagine? No, it's
Spider-Man.
not that. Are we ready, V-Dog? Do we have a timer?
I'm
right.
ready.
As I've already said, every horror film I've ever watched has been against my will. I've watched 3. I've watched.
Oh, I made you watch once, Seb.
That's one of the 3. I watched 7, which
Yeah.
we've already said might not even be a horror film. We watched Deep House when we were on tour, which is a film about a house.
It's the worst
under-
film ever. Worst film
Do
ever.
you know what? I genuinely enjoyed it because I wasn't frightened.
It was awful.
It's about Saru made us watch it, and it's about an underwater house that's been sunk in a lake, and 2 divers go down to have a look. That's pretty much the whole.
That
is
sounds
it's
great.
Just, they're just like, should we have a look?
It's terrible. It's
really
terrible.
bad. And also because they've
It's the
got,
worst
like,
film I've
diving
ever
masks
seen.
on, their audio is all like dubbed over, but it just sounds like something from like an
Yeah.
NPC from a video game.
Right. Yeah.
But
just
it's like-
we should
it's
have
like-
a look.
It's like they tried to record it with an audio mechanism like in the thing and realized that it sounds too
didn't
muffled
work.
or too weird. So they were like, fine, we'll just dub over the whole thing. And it's just like people underwater with enormous like diving masks on. and then crystal clear speech. It's so jarring and
It's
so
really
horrendous to
bad.
watch.
It's real bad.
It's
There's also like
awful.
a bit where he just goes like, "Let's release the drone" for no reason. You can tell that they just like got this thing
It's
and
so
were like,
bad.
"We'll just cram this in somehow." Anyway, I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
doing
awful.
that.
Well, you can do whatever you want when you record all the lines in a studio after the film.
That's very true. Okay, so I've listed 2 of the 3 films I've watched, and I want to say that of the 3 films, this is the one I hated watching the most, and therefore is the scariest.
Right.
I hated watching it. I hated writing about it, and I'm going to really unenjoy talking about it. I can deal with gore. Gore's fine. I can deal with jump scares even, but psychological horror really fucks with my head. And I do think, I'm an oversharer. We all know that. I do think this is probably because when I was a kid, things like spooky spirits and like good or bad vibes in a house or something were very real. Like if I was like, "Oh, I got a bad feeling in here," my mum or dad would have been like, "It's probably a ghost." Genuinely, like for real. So, and as much as I've over the years trained myself not to think that way, it creeps back in like that, just a heartbeat, and it's back.
Oh dear.
With not oh dear, it's fine. But with that
I
in
think
mind,
it's funny. Like they're probably just fucking with you. They're probably just like, "I'll just tell them it's a
oh,
ghost."
no, they weren't. They were not fucking with me. My dad still goes ghost hunting now, so let's just put that.
What a legend.
Oh yeah.
We've been
Yeah, we've
musing
been
the idea
through
of
this,
a
haven't we?
red-handed featuring my dad ghost hunt for about 3 years. Anyway, with that in mind, it's probably not much of a mystery which film I've chosen. The film only has a few acts of on-screen violence, and yet is 2 hours and 26 minutes of skin-crawling terror. I am, of course, talking about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. The Shining was released in 1980 and was the movie adaptation of the Stephen King novel by the same name. Interestingly, despite being widely regarded as one of the greatest pieces of cinema now, it actually released to a lukewarm at best reception. It underperformed massively at the box office and was slated by reviewers. Reviewers hated it. And
So did Stephen King, didn't he?
on top of that, Stephen King, the original writer, felt that
did
it didn't have the heart of the original. He felt that it was a film, in his own quotes, designed to hurt people. And to be honest with you, I think he was probably right. I can 100% see why this film did not do well, because it's not fun. It's not a fun film to watch, and it's not designed to be fun.
Yeah.
If you imagine if films like the Alien franchise is a perfect thing, you go to a movie theater in the 80s, you're on a date or something, you go to watch the Alien, maybe it's a good excuse to hold hands or something like that. Imagine you then like, "Oh, second date, let's go to the cinema again, let's go watch The Shining."
Yeah.
Absolute disaster.
Yeah.
It's an absolute cock block of a film. It's awful. Really bad. No one has ever got frisky to The Shining. It's never happened. It's never, not once. No one has had anything happen at the back of the cinema to The Shining.
Yeah. It's pretty.
It just doesn't.
Not
It
yet.
just
pretty dark.
It would
Yeah.
never happen. It's a mutually exclusive thing. It just wouldn't take place. And I think this is partly because if you ask someone like Stanley Kubrick to make a movie, he hits the brief dead on. If you tell him to make a war film, he makes Full Metal Jacket, widely regarded to be a very accurate and unpleasant depiction of war.
Yeah.
If you ask him to make a sci-fi, he makes 2001: Space Odyssey. Fucking incredible.
Magma.
And if you say to him, make a horror movie, he says, "All right, then hold my beer." And he comes back with one of the most uncomfortable pieces of cinema in history. It's awful. It's not fun, and it's not designed to be fun.
I thought it was fun.
You thought The Shining was fun. Okay, well,
Yeah. But I like horror, so...
Yeah. What about his? If you ask him to make a space movie, didn't he just make the moon landing?
Room 278 or whatever.
right. So
Yeah, there's
enough
loads of
context.
Apollo Easter eggs in The Shining.
There is loads.
Yeah.
You definitely put
So
them in on
anyway,
purpose.
enough context. What exactly is it about this that makes it so no one is getting frisky at the back of the cinema? Well, firstly, the plot itself. The film is about Jack Torrance and his wife Wendy and their son Danny, and none of the characters are overtly likeable. Jack is a struggling writer who takes on the role of the winter caretaker of the remote Overlook Hotel nestled deep in the Rocky Mountains, bringing his family with him. And when they arrive, the last guests and staff are leaving the hotel for winter, and the snow's coming in, and they're just going to become more and more isolated. And before they leave, Danny, the young son, speaks to the hotel's head chef, who tells him that he and Danny share a telepathic ability known as shining, one which the hotel also shares because of its troubled past. Now, that troubled past is quite deeply layered, but the top layer is that the last winter caretaker went mental and killed his family. It also then becomes apparent that it was built on an ancient American burial ground. There's all sorts of layers to like why the hotel's so fucked up. But the point is, the hotel has bad vibes. And once everyone else is left and the snow and isolation sets in, it very quickly appears that history is going to repeat itself. And Jack slowly starts to lose his mind as various semi-ghostly figures begin to influence his decision. Now, I'm not going to give you a blow-by-blow of the rest of the plot or ruin the ending, so I'll just leave that there, because to be honest with you, I don't know if it's the plot that makes The Shining so uncomfortable to watch. In fact, there was a 1997 remake, a 3-part made-for-TV series by Stephen King, which is essentially the same plot, and even I could watch it because it is so much less scary, because it takes all of the uncomfortableness out of the film. What makes this film scary is the way it was shot. Firstly, the actors. Normally in horror movies, especially those of the time, they would cast lead actors that were conventionally good looking and allowed people to empathize and even sort of imagine themselves as the character, because they're likable, they're fun, they're attractive. And so we go, oh yeah, I could be them. I could be that attractive guy running around a house. No one looks at Jack Nicholson and thinks that. They're all difficult to watch. And this was a conscious decision. And it feels harsh to single her out, but we have to, because it was a conscious decision. Shelley Duvall, who plays Wendy, is one of the most genuinely strange-looking people I've ever seen in my life. and I know that's not nice to say, but that was a conscious decision by the casting team to do that. She's different looking, and that was a decision made by the cast. And they're made even more strange by the way the film is shot. So obviously they picked actors who weren't that conventionally good looking, and then they used film techniques to create a really uncanny vibe. And the most sort of common, and the one that runs through the whole film, is that Kubrick shot almost the entire film. I think there's about 3 shots that weren't shot on the same super wide 18mm lens. And what that does is when you get a lens that wide, you get like a fisheye effect as you get closer to it. So they're designed to shoot huge panoramas and get the whole thing in. But as you get closer, it starts to distort your face. And that is why Shelley Duvall looks that bizarre, because she doesn't in real life. She actually just looks like a normal person. But in that film, she looks odd. And she has that thing where her teeth seem to like kind of come out like Melina from Mortal Kombat. And that is because she's getting so close to the camera that the actual lens is like bowing her distortion, like bowing her appearance. And they also, the actors act super strangely. They don't react to things in the film the way that they're supposed to. You know, for instance, there's that really iconic scene where Jack Nicholson is talking to his son about how he'll never hurt him, because his son says, "Would you ever hurt me?" And that film was shot so many times, and in the first few takes Nicholson was genuinely reassuring, and then after 40, 50, 60 takes he just started to go weird and just starts to react really differently to how you would. Like, Michael, you're a dad. If your son said, "Would you ever hurt me?" you'd be like, "No, obviously not."
You'd be super genuine.
But if you shoot that scene that many times, the reactions become more and more bizarre.
You're going to be tired, I guess. Your mind, you're like... Oh.
And that was a deliberate decision. also a very expensive decision at that time because obviously film was like super expensive. But that idea of The Shining being deliberately uncomfortable runs through the whole film. The soundtrack is like nails on a chalkboard. It's the opposite of getting a #1 for Virgin. It's horrible. No one would go out of their way to listen to the soundtrack of The Shining. It's not even really got a musical score. It's just like odd noises played over some sort of rhythmic like heartbeat. It's really uncomfortable. And that coupled with like even the ghosts of the hotel, if you watch the Stephen King straight to TV one, they're done to look like ghosts. They're all pasty and white. They look creepy. They've got that like effect where you can sort of half see through them. The ones in Stanley Kubrick's, they just look like people. And that's so much more terrifying because you know that there's no one else supposed to be in that hotel. So the fact that there's a bartender is odd enough. You don't need to make him see-through because he's not supposed to be there. So it's just weird and creepy.
Yeah.
And what I think makes The Shining so scary is that there is no single moment of terror. You know, there is that really, obviously, there's the iconic moment where he puts the axe through the door. But that isn't what makes it scary. What makes it scary is that it's just 2.5 hours of real skin-crawling unpleasantness, interspersed with grotesque and frightening visuals and this sort of deep evaluation of the human condition that is just a little bit too close to the mark to be enjoyable. You know, Jack Nicholson's character is not a mental patient. He's just a struggling father who's an alcoholic, who beats his son. It's too close to reality. And that's what, it's not a fun watch. And I'll end by saying, I don't think The Shining is a conventional horror film. There is actually very little in it that is slasher-esque or horror-esque, but it is a horrifying film. And that is why I believe it's the greatest horror film of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely a horror film.
It is, but it's not conventionally horrifying. It's not a slasher. It doesn't have like a monster or anything like that. And I think as well, like I watched a review of it and I totally agree with this guy's description, which is that the way that the hotel is set up is like the hotel itself is the monster and that the ghosts are kind of just like tendrils. They're just like different appearances, different ways that the hotel pushes you over the edge. You know, it's all one and the same, and you really feel like they're working against Jack Nicholson's character to like push him over the edge. You know, the bartender keeps offering him a drink until he takes it, and that is a big part of why he goes wrong. And I also think the final thing that I'd say, which I think adds to it, is that it's called like a 2-beat rule, where every time the characters in The Shining see something, they see it for 2 beats longer than you do. So, for instance, when Shelley Duvall's character sees that Danny's written murder on the door, she stares at it for 2 beats, and your heart races waiting to know what she's seen. And then the reveal is so much more impactful. I feel like so many horror films just show the like, ing, 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 and it's all right in front of you. It's the same when she's rummaging through the papers, and it just says, you know, all work, no play and all that. You wouldn't know that was frightening until you saw her reaction to it. Because if you just saw her flick through those, you'd be like, oh, that's a bit weird. But seeing her reaction, seeing that she now understands that her husband has lost it, is way more frightening. And then the reveal, oh, this is why, is way more interesting. Sure. But yeah, that's why I think it's the greatest film of all time.
Greatest film of all time? Wow.
Sorry, the greatest horror film of all time. The greatest horror film of all time.
Yeah. I absolutely love The Shining. I've only seen it once, like years and years ago. But I remember really, really liking it. It is a fascinating film. There's so much to uncover with it. There's like how like I've watched videos talking about how like the house itself doesn't make sense, like the mansion or the hotel rather. Like there's doors that basically if you see from another shot, the doors don't go anywhere. Like there's rooms that make no sense.
That's
and like
alley,
alley,
isn't it? Yeah.
I think like as well, I think it's one of the reasons that there's so many like conspiracies and so much analysis of it is that it is a film that you come away from like, why would you make that? It's not a particularly fun. It's not an enjoyable cinema experience. So I think people look for more in it because it's like, well, why would you do that to yourself? Like, why would you go through making that? It's not fun. It's not exciting. It's kind of just, it is 2.5 hours of not much enjoyment. It's very powerful. And I think, like, you know, there's people who say it's like an admission of the moon landings or an allegory for the Holocaust and all this stuff. And it's like, are people just looking for more because it's so unpleasant?
Yeah, I just think, like, with horror, a lot of the time it's just to challenge you. That's all it is. It's just make it. I think Stanley Kubrick is probably trying to make it like as uncomfortable as possible. Just it's almost like a social experiment, isn't it? Like, what can people bear? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they probably are looking for a more rational explanation for it than that, because that just seems like something that you wouldn't do, but you definitely absolutely would.
I'll say Shining. Unfortunately, I don't like The Shining.
You don't
I feel
like
like
it?
it's a film I should like. I feel like if you just describe what The Shining is, I feel like it's a film I should like. I love isolation horror. I love the synopsis of the film. But I just don't like it. I don't enjoy it. And I take your point that it's not maybe meant to be enjoyable. But I don't know. It falls flat for me somewhere, and I don't know why.
Is that not because, as a horror film fan, it's the only one that really scares you? It's really in your head. You genuinely
I've only
don't
watched
enjoy
it
it.
once.
You're
No,
clutching there,
I just
Sally.
didn't get it. It felt too disjointed. I get what it was saying, but I didn't enjoy
Yeah.
it. I didn't enjoy it. So no.
I'm shocked.
I actually feel the same about A Clockwork Orange. I actually don't
Really?
really like that film. I'm like, I kind of, again, exactly same. Maybe it's Stanley Kubrick. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, it's good to a point, but there's points of it where I'm like, I kind of not really getting this at the moment. Like, I feel sucked out of the film because I'm trying to figure it out so much. Maybe it's the same sort of thing. I don't really know. But yeah, I don't really enjoy A Clockwork Orange that much.
Wow. Yeah, Stanley Kubrick makes some really strange films. I think all the films he makes are just, they have this sort of uncanniness about them.
Yeah.
It's hard to grasp. I think that's also why a lot of his films are very conspiracy theorist-esque.
That and because he made the moon landing.
Especially the one in
And that because-
1969, yeah.
Yeah, especially that film. But anyway, that leaves me to crown a winner. And I have to say, I hate all three of you so much. Because all three films, like, I would not bat an eyelid if I, like, read an article that was like, this is the best horror film of all time, and I saw either of these three films, I would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I can get by with that. So I hate all of you for making me make this decision, because I love all these three films so much. Halloween, I'd say it's the best Halloween film. It's my favorite Halloween film. I always try and make an effort at every Halloween to watch Halloween, because it has everything, like spookiness and like the great soundtrack, and I love that shoestring budget, but also it's set, in October. It's set on Halloween, so it has all like the autumn leaves that are all like around the floor and everything, and it feels very October-y, Halloween-y, has that lovely atmosphere. And then The Exorcist. Honestly, if I were to pick an answer for this, I would have just said The Exorcist as well, because I think the fact that The Exorcist is the first, and I don't know, is it the only horror film to ever get an award, like an Oscar?
I think so.
Yeah.
Probably.
Like and the fact that it was re-released in cinemas like years later, I think that speaks volumes for how still scary a film from the 70s is. And then obviously The Shining is just terrifying all throughout. It's extremely suspenseful. It's like you're watching a pot boil, and you're just sort of very slowly boiling. You're like, what's happening here? It's something's rising. The tensions are rising all throughout the film, up until Jack Nicholson's character just goes mad and just starts hacking away at a door.
I actually think, if I was going to criticize it in any way, I think that it's one of those films where the build-up is so heavy that it's almost difficult for it to pay off. I kind of think that when he does lose it, you're kind of like, oh, it's just a man with an axe on a door. Like, it's not enough because you've built this thing for so long that, like, where do you go from there?
The build-up's better than the payoff. Yeah, I can buy that. But yeah, okay. I've made my decision. I don't like the decision. But I'm gonna have to crown the greatest horror film of all time as The Exorcist.
Fair play.
Well done, Saru. It's the second
Correct
time a guest
decision.
has won.
Thank you, guys.
Well done.
Yeah, I think it's literally got everything. It's got
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the movie the movie itself is cursed. It like made ridiculous amounts of money. It like impacted reality with like the people being actually genuinely terrified of Satanism because of the film, and that was obviously a big thing like the 70s and 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that soundtrack as well is just fantastic, and the atmosphere as well. It's just dripping with that
Correct
lovely
decision.
horror atmosphere.
Now all we
yeah.
have to do is get Seb to watch it.
I know, I was
Yeah.
going to say, I have to fucking watch it now, aren't I?
Beautiful.
For God's sake.
Amazing.
Couldn't we just said The Shining and then I wouldn't have had to watch it?
No, you got to watch it now.
I'll watch like a
No, you
I'll watch
do.
a YouTube breakdown by someone who's watched it, and then I'll just
Okay. Fine.
to watch Freddy
That's
Got
okay.
We'll
Fingered
take it
as
over
well.
nothing.
Oh, yeah, you need to watch
I'm
Freddy
not-
Got Fingered as well. Yeah.
I'm not watching Freddy Got Fingered. I can't believe you even brought
Well,
that
I'm very
up.
glad. I'm very glad to have won, guys. Thank you so much for having me
That's
on and
right.
picking my film. It was the right decision.
Thank you so much for coming on,
Yeah,
Sru.
thank
you.
Thank you for sparing
No
your time
problem.
to come and go back to being a bedroom
Absolutely.
podcast.
Very, very, very happy to be on. Thank you guys for having me on. And yeah, I'm going to go have dinner now because I'm absolutely starving.
No worries.
Enjoy
Thank
dinner.
you very much.
Thank
Cheers,
you
guys.
very much.
Thank
you.
you.